Hey listeners, we're back. I'm Matt Landau from VRMB, and this is Unlocked, Season 8, First Mover Status. My theme for this season, First Mover Status, is to interview the individuals who are gaining unfair advantages over their vacation rental competition by doing certain things differently. My goal is for you to get inspired by their ideas so that you can gain first mover status in your market. Today's interview features Michelle Ruber of Shift Vacation Rentals in Portland, Oregon, which is a fleet of bespoke properties that Michelle remodeled with her husband Klaus, who makes excellent bagels from scratch. Michelle's first mover secrets lie in community building, or perhaps more accurately, community problem solving. And I'd like you to listen carefully to the ways Michelle thinks about leadership, from techniques like getting all of her company or her destination stakeholders into one room, ideally with pastries, to bigger philosophies like combining resources in surplus in order to help others in the neighborhood. I think there's a little bit of Michelle in every vacation rental professional in this sense. In each of us, this ability through our businesses to make our corners of the world a more thriving place and to make some money in the process. This episode's brought to you by Point Central, the leaders in property automation for vacation rentals, and Breezeway, a property care and operations platform that helps your team communicate, coordinate, and verify your detailed craft. As with each episode this season, I've started off by asking Michelle what first mover status means to her.
I would say that for us, being the first in Portland to have vacation rentals that are in commercial zones was a big distinction for our zoning code. We first had started in a residential area and we realized this was 12 years ago. So the whole hotbed of vacation rentals and Airbnb was just burgeoning. It wasn't really quite there yet. And we realized after starting in this residential zone that if we wanted to start it as a business and be full-time the way that we were intending, we were not doing it correctly. So we were able to buy a house that was in a commercial street on Alberta Street. It's a big pedestrian walking, cute retail street, and converted that, made it into a duplex and started there. So as far as like first mover, that for us and for Portland was where we fit into that phrase, I'd say.
And is that a tip you'd give to people who are thinking about investing in a vacation home, invest in somewhere commercial?
If that's the zoning code, for us, we knew that we didn't want to be under the radar. We really wanted to do it as a full-time business and, potentially grow. And so we knew we had to do it in a way that was going to work for the zoning of that city. I still think that from our experience, it was fitting like a round peg in a square or however you say that, because we were following the code for the city, but then you had to overlay that with the rules and how all the check boxes, if you will, on VRBO or Airbnb, those boxes weren't quite aligning because they were more geared towards doing things for how things work in a typical vacation rental. So I would say that's been an uphill battle. Ironically, following the rules maybe has been a little bit harder, but yeah, absolutely, that would be my tip. Otherwise, I think if you're someone like me, I'm a rule follower, actually, Matt. You might not think that, but I am. And it would cause like a fair bit of anxiety if I didn't.
Is that the property that you took me to and it has like a food truck in the parking lot?
Both of them, yeah. We've got two properties in Portland, one on Alberta Street and one in the Mississippi neighborhood. And both are commercially zoned. Both have two houses on a 50 by 100 lot.
But do both of them have food trucks?
Yeah, they're both commercially zoned. Do they both have food trucks? They both have amazing food right out the door. You could stumble, you could crawl to an amazing restaurant. Should you
And
want?
we were walking past one of them, and I remember you were going to show me, but the guests were there, and they were having like a beautiful dinner together. I think it was a wedding or something like that. It was one of the best times that I've ever not gone into a vacation rental because we got to see the outcome of your work.
Yeah, totally. It's fun living in the neighborhood because we often are just walking by. We're often walking by to go to dinner ourselves, and then we run into our guests. We're not checking up on them actually, but it's really fun to get to know them and have a 5 minute little interlude. It always makes the experience for us richer.
Yeah, actually, I remember that same evening we passed by the other property and we saw the other guests who I believe were part of the same party, perhaps, and we had a nice little conversation with them. They felt welcomed.
Exactly. I love that.
Yeah. From a business perspective, could you describe Shift Vacation Rentals as if you were at an industry conference to another colleague? What does it look like on paper?
We have 4 rentals. We have on Alberta Street, it's a duplex. From an architectural perspective, I think it's interesting. We took a 2 bedroom, 1 bathroom house and we made it into 7 bedrooms and 3.5 bathrooms. And we did that by literally jacking it up. Instead of it having I think the basement at the time that was unused was 7 foot ceilings. We jacked it up to 9 foot ceilings. That was a totally interesting process.
Did anybody teach you how to do that ahead of time? And listeners, just FYI, Michelle and Klaus are remodeling, like really good at remodeling. But I'm curious, that jacking up process, it looked hilarious in the photo.
It's sometimes I look back on some of the things I've done in my life and I'm like, I don't know where the gumption came from. I feel like I'm getting older and kind of look more fidgety and crankier. But at the time, we were like, we looked at it. We were like, we can. So yes, we do have another business. It's called Encircle Design and Build, and we have it's a remodeling company. So we know just enough to make us dangerous, if you will. We had never done the jacking up of a house. So that was an interesting concept to move it up. And basically, we worked with another company, but you have to disconnect everything from the inside of the house, like stairways and HVAC systems and electrical and plumbing. Everything has to be disconnected. They put in these, like what they use in railroad, they're railroad ties, and they use a pressure system and put new ties in as it lifts up bit by bit. We did have a lot of people ask us to do it to their houses afterwards. And we always said it would be so hard to price that correctly. For us doing it for ourselves, we were like, okay, if it's a little bit more one way or another way, we're able to deal, we're going to flow with that. But for clients, for like, it's an extra 50 grand, they wouldn't be so happy.
And these properties you own and manage, which is, I think, a unique in the group of individuals who we tend to work with, who are either single property owner managers or larger property managers who don't own any of the properties. So I'm wondering if that same question, how you describe Shift, how does that change from a lifestyle perspective? Is this any different than just a business to you?
Oh, yeah. I am so pro Portland. That is, I think, a big difference. Like, I live, as I mentioned, around the corner from our rentals. And of course, during COVID, I think many cities have taken a big hit. But in general, I think Portland is a really unique city filled with people that are passionate about whatever their passion is. And you feel it, like the bartenders are making their classic cocktails out of herbs that they grew outside of their yard. And that stuff is you see it's almost redundant here because you walk into the store where someone's knitting their scarves and they've shared the wool. It's amazing, the maker society is so deep and so rich here. So that is something about Portland that I think the distinction between us just owning some vacation rentals in another city, and I get that, and that just wasn't our model. I'm not slamming that by any stretch. For us, actually, what happened is we were getting married, and Klaus is from the Netherlands, and we were having all this family and friends come over. And so we were looking for larger houses in Portland to rent so everyone could stay together, and we couldn't find any. And then we thought, oh, that would be a great model for a business because there must be other people that are looking for this kind of thing. So that was one cue of how we started. And then relating that with managing it and owning it and having that all ourselves, I do think that's fairly unique, but it's something for us that we do love. We love traveling, so we love travelers. It tends to be a nice relationship there, people that are exploring and are open to new experiences. That energy is just wonderful for both of us. And we love our city. So I think all of those things combined make it a great thing to have as both something to own and something to manage.
It's always great advice for anybody who's either entering the industry from a management or ownership perspective, or literally employment, like people that you're going to hire. If you love the destination, it shows, it conveys through your interactions with guests, and it's a huge advantage over some vacation rental contact that I as a guest am booking with that doesn't, for whatever reason, absolutely love that destination. It's almost like a secret advantage, you know?
I actually just had this this experience. I was booking a spa for my 50th, and the place ended up being incredible. But multiple times I called to find out details about where else we could go for dinner or for hiking. And I would talk to someone, a reservation agent, and they were doing their best. But finally, I would be like, wait, where are you? Are you even in the state that I'm going to? And they're like, ah, no, sorry. And then I was like, have you ever even been there? And they're like, to tell you the truth, no. And I was like, okay, I'm not
Mm,
going to waste any more of your time or my time because you can almost feel them like searching Google for like where to eat, you know? I was like, no, I want your take on it, not
hmm
Google's. Like I could do that. So yeah, I think I think that is something that we definitely offer is firsthand knowledge as go to this winery, do this hike, and really passionate. Again, that maker society I think is what makes Portland really interesting because it trickles through almost every aspect. Like whether you're going for dinner or going for cocktails or going to purchase something, you can see the artistry in that.
And before we forget, I do have to give a shout out to one of the best makers that we know. Klaus is a bagel, like he knows how to make great bagels. And I've never met anyone who said, "Do you like bagels?" and then actually makes them. So shout out to Klaus, right?
Totally. Yes, my hubby. I know it's been this new thing, and now wherever we go, like often if we're going on weekends at the coast or whatever with our people, with friends, like people are always like, "Hey, you guys gonna make those bagels?" We're like, "Yeah, you know it, we got you."
You're now, there's a lot of expectations.
Yes, yeah. And when I say we, it's totally not we. It's Klaus is the bagel maker. I am the
Yeah.
eater of the bagels.
We can definitely publish a link to Klaus's recipe. We've talked about how beautiful Portland is of a community and the maker market, which I think is just growing and growing with this world of rapidly changing world that we live in. And in prep for this interview, I actually searched back to our first email
Oh,
correspondence. And you, Michelle, said, I'm part of the inner circle. I just posted about what we're doing to help with feelings of isolation and lack of community in Portland. And before I go on with the email, I'm curious if you could just explain to us what you meant by that, what you were feeling back at that time.
I was putting together something for our refugee community here in Portland, where I started volunteering within the refugee community about 4 years ago. And I realized while working with these families that they were feeling really isolated. They weren't connected to other locals. They almost weren't connected to anyone else besides like their case managers and maybe teachers at school,
And where were most of them coming from?
mainly Africa, the ones
Okay.
that I have been dealing with. And so there was a lot of isolation. There was a lot of, they were the students all the time. They weren't the teachers anymore, and they were forgetting their cultures. So I was thinking through this and thinking, how can we tick a lot of boxes? And the other box that came up in those conversations were they were always hurting for money. Many of them came from countries and they were educators or they were doctors, but those degrees don't translate easily. And then there's a hurdle of language barriers. So
Mm.
they end up taking jobs like taxi drivers or cleaners that just they don't pay as much. And also I think that there is, if you were someone like an educator, that is a very esteemed position. And then now you're a cleaner, which is a wonderful job for many people. But I think there is a difference in what you're offering or what you were able to offer. So a lot of them are just feeling lack of self worth, let's say.
And we're going to touch on your, what I think of as your kind of signature, your signature
Oh,
concept. Yeah, in
okay.
just a second. But back from that initial email, you went on to what impressed me most is that you started with this problem And you went on to explain that you took some action by inviting business owners in the area for coffee and pastries, which I absolutely loved. It's like community building 101. Let's all get into one room, whether we like each other or know each other or not, and let's talk through some things. And you said that a few themes emerged. You said that local residents didn't seem to be shopping as much, that it was mostly tourists. You said that retail shops were having a terrible year because Amazon was eroding their roots. And you said locals and longtime residents didn't feel as welcome. And so, again, before we get into that signature concept, I would love for you to share what you decided to do.
I've crafted a couple emails to you over the years, but you're right. I totally forgot about that. Thanks for taking me back. That is true. What happened was, so this is another issue where, so we're on a one day I was walking to the vacation rental and I realized I used to know every single neighbor on the street, and it's that small town feel in a big city, and I loved that. And I realized I didn't even know all of the other business owners around me, which I thought was a shonda. And so that happened. And then along with that, a lot of them were complaining about the things you mentioned, like Amazon was eroding their business. So people would come in and try on the shoes and then literally, like in front of the salesperson, pull up Amazon and order them. I was like, "That's horrible." I mean, that's so sad. You got to deal with your stinky feet. Now you're not even giving me the money. So yeah, I did that. I invited everyone over for pastries and coffee because that little sugar, little caffeine always helps. And I just asked the question of, just tell us about yourself. We sat in a circle. I was like, tell us about yourself, when you started your business, and what is the biggest challenge that you're facing right now. So I wanted two things to happen there. One, just literally to know each other and to know each other's names, to understand each other's businesses, but also to understand what this biggest hurdle was. And I was just listening. I didn't really have another agenda other than to listen to the threads that were coming through. And after everyone spoke in the circle, I realized there were common threads that needed to be addressed. And gentrification is a big word and has many issues, and has certainly something that in Portland has happened, where the areas that these businesses are in used to be historically African American, Black areas. And again, pros and cons with it. I've lived in this neighborhood for 25 years, and there used to be literally drug deals and hookers on the corner. That was something that you just saw, and most of the shops were boarded up. Now you don't see those things, and you have a thriving business community. So pros and cons with all that. I don't want to. I'm not going to even dare to touch on more of that. But what I would say is that it is interesting to see, like, how do we welcome past members and make them feel valid and important to still be there, and also welcome new people, and where does that intersect? I'm a big fan of getting a bunch of people in the room and know each other's names, and everyone's going to feel a lot better just starting
Great community building mindset. You don't have to know the solution. You don't have to have any ideas beyond let's get proximate. Let's get a little bit closer. Let's introduce ourselves and let's have pastries.
Totally, absolutely. And what came of all of this, we started doing these block parties, and we called them Block 14. And it was a good old fashioned way to bring community together. And so each business had a different thing that they wanted to do outside or inside their store. So for instance, there was a cupcake store down the street. They had blank cupcakes with all of these different frostings that people could decorate their own cupcakes. There was a face painting booth. We had a popcorn booth, and then a wishing tree where people could write wishes and then hang them on a tree. We hired a clown. There was all sorts of different things. Some of the businesses that were restaurants had little bites and nibbles. And so the community members, the neighbors, could walk around each business, meet the people that worked there, meet the owners, meet their neighbors. And it made for really good fun. I love those days. I think it was a one-day event, and you really saw a lot of people come together and just enjoy each other's company, which was the goal.
And was the feeling mutual to all of your constituents there?
I think so. Yeah. I think that the more you put into something, the more you get out of something in general. I spearheaded it with a few other businesses. So I think we really worked hard on getting other people there, anyone there. We sent out mailers and stuff like that. So I think, as with anything, the more one puts into it, the more one gets out of it. And I think that most people did. I think we built an alliance, we realized we need our neighbors to eat and shop with us, and that they also enjoyed that ability to do that in their neighborhood. And that once they felt like this comfort, it's like that Cheers idea. You walk into the bar and everyone says your name, then you just feel at home. That was the idea that we were going for.
And if someone's listening to this and thinking, I'd like to consider doing this in my destination, is that a huge time investment?
It could be. I would say yes and no to that. So the way I started it is I literally went in and introduced myself and then asked for emails. Hey, do you have the business card? Do you have the email of the people that I need to get in touch with? I sent out that first invite, and miraculously, we had, I think everyone except for two businesses were able to come. So I think often dates, like everyone's calendar and scheduling, that can become a pain. So no, yes and no, I would say. For that initial stuff, not really. The initial stuff really was like, let's just do this and see where it goes. From there were a lot of other ideas that sprung from there. Like, for instance, we pooled our resources together. In that sense, I think it was really helpful too, because we did like sales during the holidays if people were doing that. So we pulled resources. Everyone would chip in $100, and it turns out then you have $1,500 and you could do something, an ad somewhere or a mailer somewhere. Or we hired, like during the holidays, we hired a choir from our local high school. And I'm telling you, these guys are so talented. A and B, you get people singing on the streets and caroling. Everyone is happy. It was so
Mm.
magical. I loved that.
So, listeners, first thing, consider hiring a choir. Second thing, consider hiring a clown.
Another takeaways, yo. I
That's
know.
going to be the first time I think I've ever given that tip, and I love that. So those block parties, and for folks who don't know your backstory, this was not necessarily new to you. Give them a real quick snapshot of your supermarket experience, which I'm only asking you to share because I think you took lessons from that and applied it here.
Oh, okay. So, as I mentioned, the street that I live on before did not have many businesses. And one night, a bunch of neighbors were sitting around having dinner, and we were talking about what business would be great to have on the street if we were to have another one. And we decided that a co op grocery store would be a great, you know, addition, because at that time there weren't other grocery stores within walking distance. And we were like, oh yeah, that would be great. So we started a buyers club, and you had to buy things by bulk. So it was ridiculous. Sometimes I was like, oh, I did not need an entire case of pickles or whatever, but I got them. Often we would split the cases between neighbors and stuff. It made buying really inexpensive, but you also got a lot. It was like more than Costco sizes. But we started a buyers club, and we bought directly from a couple different suppliers. A local church let us set up our distribution center. So it was like once every 2 weeks we met in the basement of this church and laid out all the food, and then the families would come and pick it up. So here's another fun tip, is that another thing that we did is created a fundraiser. And during that fundraiser, what happened was we had llamas, bands, and beer. And that was the concept of the fundraiser.
I'm adding
So
that to the list of clowns and choirs now.
I knew you would. But it was a super fun night where we had over 500 people signed up to be members of a co op that was not even in existence. And they gave $100 per family. And then we went to our local nonprofit that often gives money to new businesses. And we're like, here, look at this. Look at this momentum that we have. And so they helped us with another grant. So quickly, well, when I say quickly, it took 2, 3 years, but we became a brick and mortar store. So on the corner of 15th and Alberta sits Alberta Co-op. And I remember when we had a day that it was a weekend activity where all the floors were laid and it was painted, but we had a bunch of the members come and volunteer to put up the shelves and stock the shelves and this and that. And my dad came with me and he looked around, and my dad is like a total sap, which is fabulous. But he looked around, he started crying. He was like, "This is magical. You have kids, you have elderly, you have everyone represented here. Everyone is helping. This is what you envisioned, isn't it?" And I was like, "Yep, here we go." So
Mm.
it was great. And then I think the other things with co-ops, you're buying from small local farmers, and it helps with habitat and with water runoff and all these other wonderful environmental benefits of working in a small community aspect.
And I love how you casually, we were walking past and you were like, "Oh yeah, I helped start that supermarket." Like, wait, what? So this is not asking you to go out and start your own cooperative supermarket, although you could. This is to remind you that the lessons that Michelle ends up applying to her vacation rental community building are really time tested. I mean, you've learned these things on the ground. And so now I'd like to get to that signature concept because there are a couple themes that have been running through our conversation today. One is inclusion, one is refugees, one is food. So give us a snapshot of what I believe we discussed at a separate encounter in front of a cafe in New Orleans, if I'm not mistaken.
You are totally right. And I love talking to you, Matt, because you make me feel so good. I'm like, oh, this is so sweet.
I could
Like,
charge for this service.
seriously, this is wow. I'm just floating. Thank you.
So, that idea, the refugees dinner concept, is what for those who don't know about it?
Okay. 4 years ago, I started volunteering within the refugee community. And I realized after about a year of working with these families, mainly like teaching English and just getting them integrated into society, starting bank accounts and maybe meeting with their teachers at school with them and teaching them something as simple as in their culture, maybe they didn't look elders in the eye because that was a sign of disrespect. And I would have to explain that here they're thinking you're just ignoring them when you don't do that. So a lot of things like that. And through that year of working with them, I realized that these threads kept coming through where one was they didn't really know other locals. Two was that they felt like they were forgetting their culture and their origins and their language. The third was that they always needed more money. They were often working menial jobs and didn't get paid that much. And then the fourth one was that they felt like they were constantly being taught and they weren't teaching anything. So I was sitting with that and actually was having lunch with a friend who we came together with this idea of how maybe we could do dinners where those people would, each family would come and cook something from their country. So I have a family from the Congo. They're Tanzanian originally, and they were refugees from the Congo. And they came and they cooked a traditional food dish, which is delicious. And
Never
I
heard of it.
invited, yeah, oh, guy, next time you're here, bagels and then fufu. But so what we did was I invited about 15 friends over and said, "Hey, can you guys pay $35 per person or more if you want? And we're going to do a cooking demo and then we're all going to sit down and eat together." And that the very first one, I was so nervous. I was like, "What am I doing here?" And it ended up being this totally wonderful evening where people were laughing, people were crying. I wanted it to be a dinner party with a mission, and that is what happened. And each one, I learned a little something more. So I started doing these icebreakers in the beginning because what ended up happening is I would say at the end, "Hey, can you invite 3 people that you think might be interested in this?" Because I figured my friends, they weren't going to be, there are only so many that are going to come for each one. So so by the sixth or seventh one, there was often most of the people I didn't even know, And I would start with a question that said, "What's your fondest memory of food?" And we'd go around and everyone would take a minute or two and talk about that. And that just made this wonderful connection through the room. And then the family, whoever the family was, would teach their dish. And they often did prep ahead of time, so it didn't take that long. Some of them had way more experience cooking, like professional experience cooking. Some of them were just they just cooked at home for their families. But it was always their traditional food. And then we would sit down at a long table and all eat together. And really, it was they always were magical evenings where people made connections. This one evening, the very first one that we did, we counted the money at the end, and it was $800. And the Zawadi, one of my favorites, she fell to the floor with tears in her eyes. It was almost what they would a third of what they needed. And they got it in one night and in doing something so fun where they felt relevant and excited. And then her brother looks and he said he has a card, a business card in his hand, and he wanted to go to nursing school. And he was like, "This man gave me his card and invited me to the hospital." It was like he was
Wow.
holding a lottery ticket. So the magic was ironically really easy to create, and the benefits were fabulous. And I use everything in the past tense because, of course, COVID hit and we had to stop doing the meals. But my intention is definitely to bring them back as soon as indoor gatherings can happen again.
Here are two tools that epitomize the theme of first mover status, the kind of products and services that actually give you unfair advantages over your competition. Point Central provides smart property solutions for smart vacation property managers. They help streamline operations, protect the property, and enhance the guest experience using keyless access. Why? Because guests are tired after traveling, duh. And being able to go directly to that property with keyless access instead of stopping at a manager's office, this is no longer a luxury. This is a standard practice. Plus, everybody loves avoiding extra trips due to lost keys, not to mention the constant cost of rekeying. Point Central partners stay aware with an activity log of who enters and leaves the property, which helps keep track of cleaning and maintenance crews as well. You can also gain control of your utility bills with their smart thermostats. Schedule set points so guests won't be able to drastically raise or lower the temperatures, for instance. You can ensure the temperature stays consistent when the unit is vacant. Prevent costly maintenance projects caused by water leaks, mold, or HVAC issues with real-time alerts that allow you to be proactive. Visit pointcentral.com/VRMB to learn more. And Breezeway, whose property care and operations platform helps you coordinate, communicate, and verify the detailed work and deliver the best service experience to your guests. With tools for intelligent task scheduling, quality assurance, real-time work coordination, guest messaging, supplies management, owner reporting, and more, oh my. Breezeway helps thousands of short-term rental managers and hospitality operators increase your operational efficiency and eliminate hours of manual work. This allows you to boost your service revenue. It was created by the founding team of Flipkey, which was since acquired by TripAdvisor, and Breezeway is just elevating the experience at every property they touch. Visit breezeway.io/VRMB and get implementation fees waived. That's a $1,000 value right there. Okay, let's get back to the show. And do you think that is an especially congruent idea for the vacation rental business that has homes that are not necessarily booked every night and that has a shining feature when compared to other accommodations, that is a kitchen and food which people surround themselves with?
Certainly. So that was all the emotional side of the whole thing. Taking a lens of, that's where I roll. But taking a lens of a more of a business side, we would often say, "Oh, Mondays and Tuesdays are just not that booked typically. Our weekends are great But Monday and Tuesdays, we had this big asset that sat vacant, and we would often think, what could we do with those nights? The mom of one of the families was in a wheelchair, and that's why we actually started to do it at the vacation rental, because the whole that rental is all ADA on the first floor, so she could just roll right in. And then that rental also has this huge open kitchen, living, dining space. So it was a perfect kitchen to do it in. I think it's also an interesting thing to think about from a business perspective is, what do I have in surplus and how can I do something with that surplus to help another person? Or even if you want to look at it from a fiscal side, how can I look at it from surplus and do something that another branch of a business? So for us, doing these dinners, I don't know, I've never tracked like how many people came to those dinners, saw the house, and then actually rented it when their family came in town for their son's graduation or their cousin's wedding. I would say that about 50% of our business is local people that are celebrating something. So I would think that our name could have spread that way, but I've never tracked it. The more people that see a business and that walk into it and that experience it from the inside too, I think that certainly would help.
And as a traveler, I'm coming to a new destination. I love the chance to involve myself somehow to support a local business. And I don't think there's anything more we could ask for from travel than to have a transformative experience like that. Is it something you could see yourself sending to prospective guests for their stay?
Actually, just yesterday, someone called and said, "Hey, there's 9 of us and we really want to do a unique kind of dinner. Like, what would you recommend?" So we're going through all these restaurants, like how much do you want to spend, restaurants, and this and that. And then I was like, you know what? The coolest thing that I could offer is that I have a family from Iran, and they are professional cooks, and they cater these dinners that are phenomenal. They're so good. And I could work with her on putting together a menu for you guys, and you could have it catered in the house. And she was like, "Oh my goodness, that is perfect. That meets our core values as a company, that we would
Mm.
be all over that." And so right now I'm working and doing that with that family. I'm like, okay, here's how many people, blah, blah, blah. And so during COVID, I did help, in particular, that family. For other friends and other guests of ours and the vacation rental, they would cater meals and bring them over, and they get paid directly for that. The food is phenomenal, and it always does feel good to help someone in that intimate way.
The way you described that it fulfills all of our values really reminded me of my time in Panama. For those who are not aware, we were dealing with street gangs and violence, and we created a program in a similar way to the way Michelle attempted to solve her community's issues. And the outcome of that program was small businesses by former gang members offered a variety of products and services, but by far the easiest sell for us from the vacation rental perspective was the walking tour of the former Red Zone. This was for former gang leaders who would invite visitors through the neighborhood and to show what things used to be like. And they would end it with fried fish and a cold beer in the alleyway. And it was the best, by far, investment in repeat bookings that myself or my co-founder could have ever imagined. Of course, apart from all of the social change that was happening, because when travelers are coming somewhere, they want an experience that moves them in more than just going out to a restaurant. So I absolutely love the way that you connect those dots. And I especially like the way you think about it. What is something that we currently have, ideally in surplus, that could help somebody and potentially invite a visitor into that process? It's just completely first mover status. By the way, I think that's your first mover status right there, the way you think.
Thank you, Matt. That's sweetie.
Let's talk about something far less purposeful, your technology stack. Because I
Ooh.
think people are going to be listening to this and saying, okay, this lady, I like her. She's smart. She's solving problems in her local community. But I also want to know what tools she's using to run her vacation rental business. So, would you mind sharing a few tools, whether it's a product or a service, that you really count on? No affiliate deals, folks, here. We're literally getting this straight from Michelle's experience.
So I would say one of the things that we did recently, like within the last year, it's been about a year, we joined on to rented.com, who deal with setting our nightly price. And I used to be one of those people, I think you would call me a set it and forget it person. We did pricing tiers, high season, low season, weekends, and I would look at what other vacation rentals in our areas were doing, but I definitely was a set it and forget it. So I joined on to rented.com and I was shocked. I would have never asked for what they're asking for. I actually put caps on them because I didn't want them to ask, even though we were getting some of these higher pricing. I also didn't want to exceed the guest expectation. I think there's a certain sweet spot there. But it really surprised me how much more per night we could get. And granted, sometimes they were also filling spaces too. Sometimes it went lower, but then they filled in on weeknight spaces. So that dynamic pricing and having someone actually manage that for me, that really surprised me. I thought, oh, that's silly. Why would I pay for someone to do that? And that's when then I'm thrilled that I did.
I attended Amy Hinote's Data and Revenue Management Conference, which was very above my head in terms of the subject matter. I'm not a numbers guy. I'm not a finance guy by any means. But what really wowed me from that conference was how many owners and managers were using these new tools, doing exactly the same craft that they were previously, but using these new tools and now making more money. It was almost sitting on the table. So I absolutely love how we've clued people into thinking about that. What other pieces of your technology seem to make a difference?
We use Logix as our software, and they're great for us. They reply immediately to questions, and they've just started a whole new interface. And I would say it's, again, shocking to think about back in the day when I didn't have a software system and how many things I don't, as you can tell, I'm a touchy feely kind of gal. So I really do want to have a more intimate experience. But in the same sense, it was a lot to remember to send all of those emails. Like, that can be automated because let's just face it, I'm just telling someone the door code or the Wi-Fi password, all the where to park, all that kind of really detailed information. And so having all of that automated is, I can't even tell you how helpful that is. I love that.
And for somebody who's listening who is maybe not currently using a property management software, but still wants to retain the human touches, whether it's a manual email or literally passing by the front of the property, you can find your balance there, right?
Oh, absolutely. What I do is I often, when someone makes a reservation, they might put in the notes something very specific, a question about which wineries would you visit, or do you have a favorite hike, or something like that. And so what happens is my automated email, once the reservation is accepted, will go out and all of that pertinent information gets to them. And then I can go in and send a personal email that says, hey, I noticed that you asked about A, B, and C, and answer that specific question. And likewise, there are a lot of people that I'm this way, but there's a lot of people that aren't that way. They're like, hey, we're coming from a family reunion. We could care less about you. We just want to get into the house and have fun. But I get that too. So I think it actually answers that question for both sides.
Beautiful. Give me one third piece of your technology that you think really makes a difference.
I'd love to say social media, but I don't know if we actually get bookings from that. And then we do e-newsletters. Again, I don't know how helpful
Love
that is.
this.
I know
That's
you're like
helpful.
I know you're like a huge fan of it, and I like do it because I'm like, Matt would be proud of sending out that MailChimp, like here we go. And I really work hard on trying to make the content interesting and relevant for people. But as far as does that create another booking for us? And maybe this is to my fault. Is there a better way to track it? I don't know. I do those things. I don't know how helpful they are.
I'm just going to step in here and say they
Yeah.
are extremely helpful. It reminds me of one of my favorite phrases, which was someone was trying to, I think it was Gary V, was trying to sell a large corporation on an social/email nurture campaign. And they kept pressing him, "What's the ROI? What's the ROI of this investment?" And he eventually came back and he said, "What's the ROI of your mom?" And the boss was like, "Excuse me?" And he went on to explain how your mom doesn't have an immediate ROI. And yet, all of those little things that she did over the years make you who you are. And you could never achieve what you're doing without her. So I like to think of email marketing as one of these requirements to continue cultivating the relationship with former guests, to continue sharing interesting information, even if people don't immediately book, because it's what we do. So I appreciate you sharing that. And you said you use MailChimp for that?
I do. Yeah, so there
Okay.
you go. Maybe I don't have an I always, because I think you do a great job of giving all of these suggestions and then also tracking them. Like you're big on both sides. That's what I love about you is you have this humanistic side and then you have this really big business side. So I guess when I answer that question,
Oh.
I'm like, how do I how do I show that I'm doing good in business with it? But I don't know.
You have your own set of KPIs and I love them. Michelle, I would like to fast forward to today because your work is ongoing and slow and steady. But today you're at this, what I think is both a unique crossroads, but also one that I think eventually a lot of smaller owners and managers will get to. And that is your sort of decision of how to proceed with this business because you've been doing it for a long time and it is very intensive. Would you mind sharing just any big sort of decision that's going through your mind for other folks who might be in the same position?
Immediately what comes to mind is like that. You got to know when to hold them. No win for Kenny. And I'm like, I think that there's like this essence with vacation rentals. It relates to the first mover status. I wonder, and I don't have a crystal ball, but I wonder with the vacation rental industry, we got in at the low point, we were riding the high. And I just wonder if there's this like exit time, this graceful exit, like you leave at the height of the party and you're like, bye, see you, woo, versus you're the last one to go. And I think that there's that plays in my head right now where I just wonder, I want to end on the high. And so we have been thinking, like, hey, if we were to sell this business, what would that look like? And I'm not funny enough, Matt, when you were here, we were talking more about it. And then we kind of went around to like, why would we sell it? Like it's doing so well. This seems ridiculous. So I will say we're a little bit all over the map, but the conversation is super interesting because what we learned was it's not as easy we'll have a smaller, let's say, pool of people that are interested in buying it because we're selling both the business and the property. And I know this people might be rolling their eyes. Yeah, you never thought about that, but we didn't. We never thought about that. In a way, it saves us because we always have a backup strategy. We can always just sell the property, which is wonderful. Um, I think in the end we'll sell it all because it just cash flows so wonderfully and it is a wonderful thriving business. And we go back and forth with if we don't really need to, why should we? And then that same know when to walk away, know when to run. I'm not sure right now. My feeling is, hey, just hold it. It's doing great. We're fine. But then when there's some sort of like emergency, like a guest floods the laundry machine, and like, I'm like, okay, I'm done. So I guess it depends on the day.
And have you considered having somebody else manage it?
Okay, so if you can't tell, I am a micromanager. Everything is staged beautifully. It's cleaned, A plus cleaning every time. There's treats waiting for them. So I I tend to be arguably maybe too hands on at times because I want to make sure it's so perfect, which I think other people could do, obviously. But it's been the reason why I haven't handed over our business to a larger managerial company. I think it would lose some of that personality, let's say. But I do think that is also a strategy. We've talked about that and that could also happen. I'm not sure what's going to happen right now.
Expectations or demands would need to be compromised?
I think it depends on the way that we do it. It's funny because, in a certain sense, like my experience with rented, who knew that we could get that much more money? So that was a really eye opening. Hey, we bring on someone new and it ends up being this pinnacle difference in your bottom line dollar.
Mm.
So then I think conversely, could someone do this better than we do it? So if I had a smaller company in Portland that I thought was doing a wonderful job, I would consider that. And I did have one of our cleaners became a manager for us years ago. And so she managed everything. But what I ended up doing is micromanaging it. So it was almost that we
Right.
paid her all that money when I was like tapping in. And that was my bad. I could have jumped out. We ended up taking that management on. Now life is picking back up again. I have another cleaner who she's wonderful, and she steps in for me when I want to take a week off or what have you. And she would be a great person she could totally competently handle the whole thing if we decided to really step out from the day to day stuff. And honestly, the software does help so, so much. So there are, I have a good friend he manages large teams of people, and he always says, okay, you got your role, but when you're gone, who's going to do that role? And Klaus has his role. And Klaus is like, I mean, that kid is the handiest kid in the earth. And so he is constantly over
He
there
is a
fixing
handy kid.
things. Oh my goodness. It's amazing what he can do. And so it's like when he has back surgery, which just happened, who's going to take his role? Like, who do we have in place to place these people up? And we have those people now. So we could bow out. I don't know. In the same sense, we still are enjoying doing it. And I will say that I know I'm saying both things at the same time. Like, on one hand, it's really easy. And on the other hand, it takes lots of effort. And I think it depends on when, if like we get a call at 10 o'clock and the air conditioning isn't working and we're in town and we could just walk over, no big deal. But if we're in like Thailand, that's a big deal. And that's when it becomes stressful. So
Mm.
I think as life picks up again and maybe we start getting back to more normal kind of travel and all these other passions that we love, we will probably figure out things that other people could step into. And then that question of selling on the high, selling when it's really going really good, that plays into my mind. Both of those things are happening at the same time, I'd say.
Really nicely put. You seem to be someone who's really good at taking on problems and attempting to fix them. You've clearly had plenty of challenges that you have overcome with this business. And I know right now there's a particular member of your refugee circle that needs help. And I'm curious if you can share that through the lens of things that your business gives you the chance to do.
Rehab is this wonderful refugee that is from Sudan, and her husband right now has been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. He is just last night got discharged from the hospital and is in palliative care. So there's no cure. And then on top of that, she's got 4 children, one of which is highly autistic. So I look at her life often and I think, oh my goodness, like she just has so much going on. And yet she shows up in these ways that are like phenomenal. She's so peaceful. She's so grounded. She's a firm believer in education. She has done so much to make sure that her kids are wonderfully educated here and speak perfect English. And she's just an angel in a person's body. And she has been cleaning for the Moda Center, which is our big concert center and where the sports are played. But then, of course, during COVID, all of that stopped. And she also she cleans for us at Shift and does a wonderful job. Again, during COVID, a lot of that stopped. So she's been struggling financially. There's been struggles happening, like for many of us that don't have, for many people that don't have the cushions that a lot of upper middle class and middle class people have. COVID is really showing the struggles of those in less fortunate situations. So right now, I started a GoFundMe site to help her just during this time. Can we get some money for the palliative care and get some money so that she can pay her rent and groceries and just stabilize her family during this time? And I would say it's my honor to help in these times and give back.
It's such a poignant reminder that we are all in the hospitality game of life,
Yeah.
taking care of people and making people feel like they belong.
It's interesting because another one of my best friends had this horrific experience happen with her mother. And I saw how she was able to jump on a plane and go to Chicago and be with her. And we were all rallying behind her and taking care of her kids and taking care of the family. And money wasn't an issue in this example. But she had family, she had friends, she had community, and she had money. And so this horrible situation is padded with all of these other things. And at the same exact time, I had this situation happening with rehab, and I realized, when we have these things to fall back on, these dips don't, we don't bounce, we don't crash, we don't crack. And I'm like getting choked up, but that's the beauty of it. That's the opportunity that we have.
What a powerful note to end on. My big takeaway is no matter how big or small your vacation rental company may be, you can always reach out into your local community to help solve problems. And this impact, no matter how big or small your efforts are, it tends to put you in a class of your own in the eyes of your neighbors, your employees, and even your guests. By identifying the things you'd like to improve in your local community, you create basically the deepest moat a small business could ever hope for. And lifestyle-wise, this has given Michelle purpose, options, and joy. If you'd like to join me and Michelle, and over 1,000 of the world's most thoughtful vacation rental professionals collaborating on a daily basis, join us at vrmb.com/join. And here's a teaser for next week's episode. Graham Donahue of Sykes Cottages, a very different, but perhaps equally amazing kind of first mover status.
Yeah, I think of it very much about a competitive advantage. There is a negative, when you're number one and you're first, there's always someone who's trying to shoot arrows in your back because there's a number two typically as well. But for me, primarily, it's about first mover advantage and giving yourself a competitive edge.
That episode's coming out next week. Make sure you're subscribed to receive it immediately. Ciao for now.
It's coming back, but who would blame me if I wait for it? Ooh.